Welcome to Bringing Romans to Life. I'm Preston Burrows, and in this lesson, we'll consider the broad outlines of Roman imperial perspectives on religion, time, and the imperial gospel. In this module, I'll be introducing you to a few very important aspects of the Roman Empire in which Paul lived and the recipients of Paul's letter lived. So Paul lived and breathed in the Mediterranean region. His people, at first called the Hebrews, then later the Israelites, then later the Judeans, they called the place of Judea home. And this area is essentially a land bridge between Africa and Asia. And then Asia then connects to Europe. During Hebrew Bible and Old Testament times, Israel or Judea lay between two competing empires, the one in Egypt and the various ones in Mesopotamia. And then later, Greece first, and then Rome became the centers of world power. Now, you may have heard the phrase Greco-Roman to describe all sorts of things. Let's think about what that means. Essentially, the Romans adopted and adapted Greek culture, religion, beliefs, philosophy, and practices. And so we can call this time period that expands from the Empire of Greece, the Greek Empire, into the Roman Empire as a Greco-Roman time. In particular, Rome drew upon and reconfigured Greek religion in formulating its own practices and stories of the gods, of people, and nature. Like many societies in ancient times, Romans worshipped and appeased many gods and spirits. And those gods and spirits held different forms of power and status, and even locality. Time in this culture was understood in religious terms, in relation to the gods. Unlike a Jewish and then a later Christian view of time that unfolds linearly, progressively, the Roman view of time was cyclical. This meant that the ages would repeat themselves. They would go from the Gold Age to Silver to Bronze to Iron Age, and then from the Iron Age back to the Gold Age. More specifically, Romans viewed time and the ages as involving moral, societal, and natural decay and then restoration. For example, a Roman narrative of the ages would say it goes from the age of gold, in which nature produces freely for people, and people are just and faithful, and the god Saturn reigns. Then it devolves into the age of silver, in which there's a little bit decreasing fertility, decreasing morality and piety, and the god Jupiter reigns. This devolves further to an age of bronze, where again, there's decreasing fertility, morality, piety, and increasing violence. Finally, everything devolves into the age of iron, where fertility, morality, piety reach their lowest point and violence prevails. Eventually, when things got so low, Romans believed that time and civilization would transition back to the Golden Age under the leadership and on account of the leadership of a pious, moral leader. Roman society would then go back to its own moral, pious ways as they understood morality. Nature would fall in step with Rome's leader by becoming more fertile and cooperative, And then the friendly gods would support all of these processes. This perspective can be summed up with the phrase Roman Imperial gospel, which developed during Augustus's reign. And he reigned from 27 BCE to 14 CE. He was the first true Roman emperor. So what did this gospel claim? That Augustus brought peace to the entire region, that he was pious and devout. He reestablished traditional values and morality. He provided for his people, and this was especially like as the chief patron of society. He protected his people and land, and he renewed the earth's fertility. The best articulation of the Roman imperial gospel that I've found comes from the Roman poet Horace in his Odes 4.15. And this is from McClatchy's translation from 2002. It says, "Your rule, Augustus, has brought bounty to our fields, reined in the recklessness of those who would swerve from the straight course, banished wickedness, and called us back to those ancient ways by which the Latin name, the power of Rome, the fame and majesty of her empire have been gloriously extended from where the bright sun first rises even to its westernmost bed. While Caesar stands guard, no turmoil at home, no arms abroad can unbalance the peace, and no wrath that forges swords shall beset our cities." Of course, the specifics of this imperial gospel are unique to the Roman Empire. But more generally, what we discover here is a common ancient view of the interconnectedness between and among humans and nature. To some extent, human activity was understood to affect the condition of nature, and consequently, nature's own health established the conditions for people's well-being and ease on the land. We, of course, could go deeper into the Roman imperial gospel and the ways in which it affected human and non-human life. I encourage you to watch for my upcoming course on the Roman Empire. But for now, keep in mind that the people who ruled Paul's world worshipped other gods and viewed time and history very differently from Paul and other Jesus followers. Although Rome gave Jews or Judeans the right to worship as their scriptures and traditions had taught them, and although some Romans respected Jews and Judaism for their long history, Romans sometimes, and maybe even often, looked down on Jewish practices. They didn't understand why Jews worshipped without any images or statues. And they belittled Jews for not eating pork and looked down on them for practicing male circumcision. In certain cities and in certain times, non-Jews tended to disdain and even persecute Jews. On the flip side, some Jews viewed Romans with suspicion. They may have looked down on Romans and Gentiles in general for their worship of idols and for what Jews deemed to be immoral activities. In our next lesson, we'll consider a bit more about first century Jews and Judaism, and all of this will prove relevant to our study of Romans, since a great deal of what Paul talks about in this letter concerns how Jews and Roman Jesus followers can get along. But for now, I encourage you and invite you to reflect on the prompts provided in this module for your contemplation.